We're live. Okay.
Hey, hey, everybody! This is Jim and Dale, Jim West and Dale Ross at I guess we call it the Jim and Dale Show. Is that right, Dale?
That's right.
Okay. Anyway, it doesn't matter who's first or who's last. You look at Ricky Bobby. He says if you're not first, you're last. But I disagree. You can be second, you third, you can be fourth. Hell, you can be even fifth.
Well, out of two, second is last. So,
Well, that's true. That's true. But Dale, I just want to remember. Want to ask you this. Back in the '60s, probably late '60s, there was a team called Reed Ross, and they're located in Fayetteville. In Fayetteville, back in the '70s and even the early '80s, they were a dominant area, just like Greensboro used to be. Do you remember that? You remember Reed Ross?
I do not, but I
Oh,
do. I do remember that the Fayetteville area was pretty strong, but no, I do not. I,
I'm gonna
that's
have to. I'm gonna have to share with you some of my statistics that you'll enjoy. I mean, right now you were thinking about Fayetteville, you think about like 71st, you think of Jack Britt, you think about Southview, which is over in, I guess, Hope Mills. You think of Cape Fear sometimes, but Reed Ross actually was the dominant program back in the day. And they gave up football back in '84. They went to a classical school, and they never long after '84 they never had any high
hmm.
school football. And I want to share that with you. And once I find it, I will share with everybody. Every so often you get a school that was like really strong for about 10, 15 years, and then they just kind of disappear off the face of the earth. And Reed Ross is basically the classical school when it comes to that.
Right.
And let me find that sucker.
Well, one of the things I've said for years, at least about football here in Mecklenburg County, is that power cycles. It cycles around. And unfortunately, as we saw last week, you have some programs like Garinger was very strong and then have basically they hadn't dropped off the face of the earth, but they fell pretty hard.
They sure did. Yeah, Garinger was like a powerhouse until about 75 or so. And then after 75, that's where can see the linear regression. They went from right up here, they started going down and down and down and down. So here is Reed Ross. They played 3 games on varsity back in '68, and they lasted until 1984. And their overall record was 125, 49, and 1. They won 71% of their games for about 16 years. Dell, if you win 70% of your games in a 16-year span, what would you consider that program? Would you consider them to be pretty successful or very successful?
It's highly successful. I think that's very
Let's
successful. Yes.
let's look a little bit in here. The first year they played 3 games. They went 1-2. They played Sanderson twice because Sanderson was a brand new school back in 1968, and then they played Hoggard. So they basically played a JV schedule in '68. '69 was the very first year. I don't know if you remember Massey Hill. Massey Hill was over in Cumberland County.
I know the name. Never seen them, but yes, yes, that one I do know.
Okay, Massey Hill, I believe, became Cape Fear. There was one of the schools that joined Cape Fear.
Okay.
They won against Massey Hill, Pine Forest. They won. They lost to Terry Sanford. No shame losing Terry Sanford. Terry Sanford was known as Fayetteville High School until 1968. That was the
Hmm.
that was basically the Garinger of Fayetteville at the time. Sanderson, which was again a brand new school. Jacksonville, who was an established school, it was a conference game, believe it or not. Lost to them 28-6. Lost to Enloe 48-0. Beat New Hanover. New Hanover was the basically Wilmington High School until like I think 1961 or so is when they went to New Hanover. You got Ligon. That was, I think, next to last year. Ligon was around. Ligon was the historically black high school in Raleigh, the big 4A school in Raleigh. Hoggard they beat 48-12, and they lost to Fayetteville Smith. Back then, though, Dale, is it was an interesting thing that high school that conference went from Fayetteville to Jacksonville to Wilmington. That was
Hmm.
a
That's a big,
geographically that was a big conference.
that's a big area. Yeah.
So we're going to 1970. They won 7-3. Lost to Terry Sanford by 4 points. Lost to Jacksonville by 12. And they lost to E. Smith by 12. Next year went 8-2. Lost to Terry Sanford by 1 point and lost to New Hanover by 2 points. And they didn't go to the playoffs. This is what we are talking about earlier on. Basically, you had to win your conference to go to the playoffs.
Yeah.
And they lost 2 games. Both of them were in conference and lost by a total of 3 points.
Well, they beat Pine Forest to death, didn't they?
Oh, they beat the heck out of Pine Forest, 40-0.
Wow.
1972, they went 12-1, and this was back when the 4As actually. This was like one of the first years they actually had a consolidated playoffs where it was you didn't have an East champion, you didn't have a West champion, you actually had a state champion, and they went undefeated during the regular season. They beat Goldsboro 38-6, beat High Point Central, which back then they were a powerhouse, beat them 28-27, and they beat High Point Andrews. Or excuse me, lost to High Point Andrews 24-17. High Point Andrews now is a two-way school. Back then they were a 4A school.
Right.
I mean, just think about that. I mean, it's amazing about how things have changed. I guess it was about 7, 8 years ago. High Point Andrews played Monroe for the big two-way state championship, and I think High Point Andrews won like 16-14. And back then they
They,
played 4A full.
they were
4A.
4A, right.
This was for the state championship. High Point Andrews now two-way, and Reed Ross doesn't even exist. They don't have a football program at all. Look at that here. During that period of time, during regular season, oh, let's see here. They allowed 34 points. This past Friday, I went to a football game. I think they allowed 4 points by halftime.
Right. Not
So
uncommon now,
not
unfortunately.
uncommon. Unfortunately, you got that right.
Yeah, not uncommon.
73. They went 9-2. Lost in the first round of the playoffs. They lost to Sanford Central, which is now part of Lee County. Sanford Central was Sanford, Broadway, and Greenwood consolidated, and after the '76 season, become Lee County. 1974 comes around, and we were 10-2. But look at all these low-scoring games here. They lost to Richmond County 29-14. No shame in that at all. But if you take out that in the regular season, you take out those 29 points, they allowed 40 points after that. It's just amazing.
That is.
They beat Jacksonville by a point, and then they lose by 34-0. 1975. This is when all the Fayetteville schools, all the 4A schools, ended up playing the same conference. The same thing happened in Mecklenburg County. There was a mid-year realignment, and I think the only schools that were allowed to play in the conference was Hoggard, if I remember correctly. I think New Hanover ended up being a 3A school at that time. Again, they went to the playoffs. They lost to Richmond County. They lost to them 21-7. 76, they went 8-2. Lost to Hoggard. Lost to Pine Forest. I mean, today, if a team went 8-2 in the regular season, there's exactly a 0% chance that they would not make the playoffs unless
Right.
there was some type of
For
extenuating circumstance.
right, exactly.
1977,
But
8-2.
That's that that's that era of win a conference championship or you don't go.
Exactly right.
You know,
1978, they had an ugly, ugly season, went 4. 79, another dark year, went 6-4, and 80 they went 4-6. But then look at 81. 81, this is back when they had
wow.
Division One and Division Two football. They did not win their conference. They lost to Terry Sanford. Terry Sanford beat them 14-12. They went to Division Two, and back then Division Two you had 4 teams that were playing for the Division Two championship. They beat High Point Central 21-7.
Mm.
82 they went 7-4. 83 they went 9-2. In 84 they had their last season, which was their worst. They went 5-5. But I mean, 69-84 when they actually played a complete game, played a complete season, they didn't have a losing season except for
That
1980.
exactly. That 1 4 win season.
Pretty amazing, isn't it?
It is. Um,
So I want to
so they
open
went
that up.
to. So now, what is there? Or the school still exists?
I don't know if they exist or not. I know that they're a classical school. They no longer had. It was basically an alternative school after '84, and I don't know if they still exist or not. I think the answer is no, but I'll have to do some digging on that. The granddaddy of all of the schools, and I'm gonna try to pull it up here in a second. Let me Richmond County. They did not exist until 1972. Now, Dell, here's a little trivia for you. There were 4 high schools that consolidated after the '71 school year into Richmond County. Do you know the 4 schools?
No. I would assume they were schools after some of the towns there in the county, but
Here's one of them,
no.
Rockingham,
Okay, Rockingham. All right.
and let's see here, Rannon. That was a 2A school, and they were a powerhouse in football. I'm gonna tell you right now, they were great. They went 83-38 from 1960 to 1971. They were part of the old Central Tar Heel Conference. They used to play like East Montgomery, West Montgomery, Siler City, Northwood, and third school is Hamlet's.
Hamlet would that would make sense.
And then there's actually where my grandfather was born, the town of Ellerby.
Uh huh.
Ellerby was not much of anything back then. So these 4 schools they consolidated. And let's look at Richmond County. 1972, they're actually the only year they were ever 3A. They were in 1972, the very first year. How many teams do you know, Dell, that went undefeated during the regular season in their very first year?
In their very first year.
I can think of one other school, believe it or not. It was Bowman, which later on became Anson County back in 1967 or 68. But Richmond County went undefeated their very first year.
Let's see here. Geringer's. Is that Geringer's second year when they won the state championship?
Maybe.
Wasn't that their first year? I thought that was their first year. For some reason, I was thinking that was their first year.
You know, Geringer was known by different names. They were named Charlotte, I think Charlotte High, Charlotte one time.
Well, there was when they shut down the school, which was down by Central Piedmont. Students went to Garinger and Harding, I think it was. But your records don't go back
Gotcha.
that far, do they?
Yeah, unfortunately, do not. 1973 was the very first year they had a losing season, and 1973 was their last year they had a losing season. They went 4-5-1. Dale, let me ask you this: if you had a high school football team that you really follow, like I know you're a West Mac grad, and West Mac only had one season, they had a losing season. They went 4-5-1 in a decade, and that was you
Yeah.
had to live with that. I mean, would you be a happy man or not?
You know it.
Okay,
Except we're talking about a West Mac now. Once programs start winning and winning a lot, then they become very disappointed when they see something like that. But
right.
yeah, what school wouldn't be? Most schools
E-
would be, right?
Exactly right.
I mean, there's you pick a lot of 10-year spans, you're not going to find too many schools that had winning seasons. That'd be an interesting stat to see.
Now look at this conference they had to play in. They had to play Terry Sanford, they played E. Smith, Bowman, Reed Ross, and Scotland County. I mean, now you think about Richmond County, they usually play Hoke County, which was not in their conference. They usually play Lumberton. They usually play Purnell Sweat, which it's that would probably back then would be Pembroke, back when Pembroke had a high school. It was a lot different. Bowman, which later on became Anson County around the early '80s, was in that was in that conference. 1974, they went from 4-5-1 to 9-4, and they actually ended up playing Sanford in the third round. That might have been a I think that was probably a regional final game. I think they actually had 4 rounds by 74. 1975, they tied Ashbrook in the non-conference. That's pretty interesting seeing Ashbrook play Richmond County. That was a pretty good distance. Come think of it.
In that time frame, most definitely.
They ended up losing to Greensboro Rose, 31-14. But look at all these games right here. One, two, three, four shutouts. I mean, they beat Hook County. They beat basically Anson County. Beat Lumberton and Scotland. 10 points, and they scored in those 4 games. They
Yeah,
scored 136.
they put the wood to them.
1976 actually made it to the state championship game. They played West Charlottes. They played them in the very first game of the season. Beat them. Beat Bird. Beat Ashbrook and beat Terry Sanford in the non-conference. Beat Hook County 60-6. Wadesboro 47-0. I mean, just look at that. I mean, just dominance here. Sanford, which was a very strong team back then, they're in the same conference, only beat them 22-15. I doubt Sanford made the conference or made the playoffs that year because of that.
I would be surprised, unfortunately. That
But I mean,
era.
just look at that though. That's just unbelievable. They
Yeah, there's
allowed
Andrews
78
again.
exactly allowed 78 points during the regular season, and but they scored 318. So they beat Sanford on Sanderson. They beat Carey. They beat Fike, and then lost to Andrews. So 1977 comes around, and they had a very mediocre year that year. I mean, they lost to East Meck. And Dale, what happened to East Meck in 1977? Do you remember?
No, of course I do.
Yeah.
That's your state champion.
So they lost to the state champions of 30-0 very beginning of the season. Beat Durham High School back when Durham had a high school. It was called Durham High. Beat Ashbrook back when Ashbrook had a really good program. Sanderson they lost 7-0. And then they were doing pretty good during the conference, and they lost to Lee County. Got in the playoffs, beat Broughton, then lost to Pine Forest. Then look at 1978. This is what we call the era of Raider magic. The Raiders won in 78, 88, 98, and 2008. A lot of people thought they might win in 2018, but they did not. But always known for the power of eights for a long time. But look at that. They lost to East Meck 3-0. They lost to Ashbrook 19-6, 19-16. And then after that, they won 10 games in a row. Or actually 11 games in a row, I think. Yeah, 11 games in a row.
Yeah.
But look at
West
this here.
Charlotte.
They beat Bertie 6-2, and Bertie now is a 1A school. Beat Eastern Wayne 14-0. Eastern Wayne, I think they're still 3A, but they might be might be 2A. Scotland's now 3A. They beat them 9-7. And West Charlotte, are they still 4A or are they 3A?
This year,
Yeah,
they're 3A this year.
I thought so. Yeah.
Yeah.
1979 comes around. They lost their very first two games in non-conference. Then they won 8 games in a row and lost to Jacksonville. Jacksonville now being a 3A school. Now here's one. 1980. They actually made the playoffs. They lost their very first 2 games of the non-conference during the regular season. Then they won 7 games in a row. Then they lost their last regular season game to Lee County, and then lost the first round to Goldsboro. 1981 and 82 were pretty mediocre years. Didn't make the playoffs. 83, they made the playoffs. You know, Dale, that's the thing about it. A lot of people think they pretty much think if you have a winning season, you're going into the playoffs. Back then, you had to have not just a winning season, you had to win usually at least 8 games, if not 9 games, to get to the playoffs.
Yeah. Really unbalanced. You had
Exactly.
you had some really good teams that played in tough conferences that didn't get to go to the playoffs.
You know, I was just looking back here. It's interesting. I didn't realize East Meck and Richmond County had such a rivalry.
Rivalry.
Yeah, the East Meck beat them in '77, beat them in '78, beat them in '79. So East Meck beat Richmond County 3 years in a row. Actually, 4 years in a row because East Meck won in 1980. I had no idea. I did not remember that.
I remember them playing a bunch. That I do remember.
Actually, gosh, it goes back to
East was a good squad, man.
so
Yeah,
from
they
70
played.
so from '77 to '81, East Meck beat them. So they went 5-0 during those years, and then they tied them in Richmond against Richmond County in '82. East Meck in '83. And then finally, Richmond beat East Meck in '84. So during those 8 years, East Meck won 6 games, Richmond County won one, and they
It's
tied
only one.
one. That's amazing.
It is. But East was a power.
It didn't look at, gosh, look at '85. '85, East Meck beat Richmond County again. So they were 1-7-1. East Meck won in '86. I was going to be Richmond County won '86. Richmond County won '87. They won in that was last year. I think they played was '87. Uh, so 1-7-1, 2-7-1, 3-7-1. So looking at that on the flip side, East Meck won 7 games, Richmond County won 3, and they tied one. That's just unbelievable.
Yep, they owned them.
Let's see here. So, like back in the early '80s, though, Richmond County was kind of down. They went 6-4-1, 6-4-1, 6-4. Then '85 comes. They lost to East Mac, and then they won 10 games straight and lost to Millbrook 10-6. 1986 they went 5-5. '87 they went 10-3. Lost in the third round to Gardner. No shame losing to Gardner. Gardner won the state championship that year. I think we talked about that last
We
Wednesday.
did. Yeah.
And then what happens? That is Richmond Magic right there. Raider Magic.
Yeah. Undefeated.
Regular season allowed 58 points. They scored
A bunch.
389 points.
Yeah. A bunch.
I mean, look at that. Oxford Webb, 48-0. I think Webb now is a two-way school. Northern Durham, which is now they're back to a 4A school. They were 3A. Beat them
That's a lot
28
of
to 10.
points in the playoffs.
Oh yeah, that
That's
was a lot.
that's a heck of a lot of points in the playoffs.
Beat Millbrook 35-14. Back when Millbrook was the premier Wake County school. 71st was the premier Fayetteville school back in the day, back in the 80s. Beat them 35-7. And then they beat West Charlotte, which was pretty much the premier football program in Charlotte back in the mid to late 80s and the whole 90s, if you ask me. This is right during the Harding and Knott's era.
Yep.
So what happened in 1989? More Raider magic here. Went undefeated, 15-0. So just think about that. They went 15-0 in '88, went 15-0 in '89. So they had 30 games they won consecutively. Let's see here. Points allowed. They allowed 99 points during the. Is that right? 99. No, it's gonna be 50. 99 points during the regular season. They scored 473 points.
Yes. Some pretty high scoring games here.
I mean, they beat Triton, they beat Gardner, they beat Northern Durham. Northern Durham back then was a powerhouse. 71st was a powerhouse. Gardner was a powerhouse. And then they beat Reynolds 39-13. Which brings us to 1990. 1990 was a little bit of weird season. The one team that actually beat Richmond County was Purnell Sweat. And Purnell Sweat right now, they would have trouble beating a very average two-way school.
Right.
And they won another state championship. They actually three-peated, beat West Forsyth, beat them 9-7. That game was over at Keenan Stadium. West Forsyth was going to win that game. Pass was thrown at the very end of the game. It was deflected right into Richmond receiver. The receiver had no business catching that ball, and he did. '91. 92 was an off year, and they still went 8-3.
Yeah. They lost to a real good South Mecklenburg team.
Yeah, 93, 8-4. Yep. No, 93 was the very first year they actually had any in the old endowment game, and we haven't really talked about that. There's no endowment game this year. First time since '92, there's not been any type of endowment game.
Right. I hadn't really thought about that.
I think there was only I think 28 teams actually had an endowment game in '93, and by '94, probably 2/3 of the teams had endowment games and got stronger and stronger as the years go on. '94 they were down, went 7-4. '95 they went 11-2. '96 they went 11-2. What happened in '97? Look at that, Dale. I mean, that's look at all those undefeated years here. '97, 15-0.
Yeah.
1998 went 16-0.
West Charlotte having a hard time getting across the river there.
Exactly. 9-1. Then look at 2000. Look who beat them in the third round in the playoffs.
Yep. State champions.
They went 12-0, and then they lost to Independence. 2001, they lost to Laney, who ended up going to the state championship. Lost to Independence 49-25, but Laney beat them 7-3. 2002 was Providence to beat Richmond County.
Yeah.
2003, they almost beat Independence. Independence lost or beat them 20-18.
I was at that game. Yeah.
Was that a good game?
That was an awesome game. One of the better games I've watched. One of the more memorable.
2004, that was, I guess, Coach Geller was the head coach then, that one year.
Yeah.
Lost to Independence 47-19. 2005 was Myers Park, beat them 22-13. But look at that, undefeated until they got to Charlotte.
Yeah.
2004, undefeated.
Myers Park went down there and popped them. Yeah. That was a big shocker, too. I think Myers Park was like they were obviously above. Well, I shouldn't say obviously, but because at that time you didn't have to have winning records to make it. But I think Myers Park was slightly above 500, maybe a few games above 500, if I remember right.
Wow.
They were a good team.
Looking back at Richmond County during these years, like during the regular season, they went a long time without losing a game in the regular season. They during the regular season from let's see, October 19th of 2001 through October 19th of 2007. So for 6 years and 68 regular season games in a row. They lost to Fayetteville 71st in 2007 by 7 points. And the last team they lost to in 2001 was Douglas Birds, so by 3 points. But I mean, just amazing. And just kind of goes back to about just how strong the Mecklenburg teams were back then. 2005,
Exactly.
Myers Park beat them. 2006, it was Providence that beat them 27-0. 2007 was West Charlotte. West Charlotte ended up having to forfeit that game.
I think that's the year. Look at the Providence real quickly there. I think that's also the year that they beat Scotland.
Let's see here. Scotland County. I can pull them up real quick.
I think so.
See, 2006, they did.
Might have been 2005. Is it?
See, 2003 is when they beat Scotland.
Okay. I didn't think it was that early back, but yeah, I guess it was because it was Bruce Harden was the coach. That's right. And by 2006, he was gone. That's right.
So go back to like 2008, Newbern. They tied Newbern, which no shame about it. In 2007, Newbern won the state championship. Lost to Dudley, no shame in that. Barely beat Anson, 21-14. Really no shame in that either. Beat Purnell Sweat. They lost to Pinecrest by 3 points. And that was kind of a shock back then. Pinecrest was not that good back then. They became a lot better as the years came on, but Pinecrest was just kind of unproven back then. Douglasburg was pretty strong, but then look at that. This goes back to Raider magic here. They won 7 games in a row and won the state championship.
Hmm. Again, I was at the Independence game and the Brit game.
2009, another strong season for them, 12-2. 2010, 12-2. 2011, 8-3. Lost in the first round to Northwest Guilford. 2012, they lost to Jack Britt's 11. They went 11-2. 2013, they lost to Northwest Guilford again, 9-4. I was saying the record was 9-4. 2004 ended up losing to Millbrook. But I mean, look at that though. My records go back through 2015, but 2015, 2014. I'm looking at all the years they had double-digit wins. It's probably easier to just count the years they didn't have them.
Right.
2013, um, 2011. But look at these here. I mean, just amazing. Dale, if you look like in the last 50 years, if you ask me the one team that probably year in and year out you always had to consider to be a state power in the 4As, Richmond County is the first team that comes to mind. How about you?
I
Year in and
agree.
year out.
I think they're always in the mix. Yeah.
I mean, you look back like they got stronger as the '90s got in, and they had a couple years they were down, but Independence basically from 2000 to 2009 they were the dominant program in the state. That was for a decade. Richmond County still won a state championship that decade. They won one in the '90s. They won one in the '80s. They won several in the '80s. Won several in the '90s. Won at least. I think they only won one in the '70s. That was a pretty dominant program overall.
Yeah, and since as I was mentioning earlier, as far as Mecklenburg County is concerned, you see power shifting. Uh, so you have have this team that's a dominant team. So it went from Independence to Butler to Mallard Creek, um, now Chambers. Um, you don't have that really, not just in the East, but especially in, say, even the Southeast, where Richmond, is prevalent because it's always so. There's no certainly you have Scotland, but a lot of times Scotland comes up being a 3A classification or their small 4A. But I think throughout that whole period, there's nobody that's replaced Richmond. You did have the uh, with splits. You had Scotland that could step in and join them, but yeah, they really didn't get replaced like what you see here in Mecklenburg County, where programs get replaced by another program to be a dominant. And sometimes the other programs still remain kind of good, but then some, you look at Independence, they fell off, and look where they're at right now. And you look at Mallard Creek, and they've
Right.
fallen off. One of the most consistent programs in Mecklenburg County is Vance/Chambers.
I agree. I totally agree.
As far as winning and being a contender, yeah, they're probably the most consistent through the period that they've been around. Um, the Raleigh schools, it kind of just, you know, rotates around, and there's really, except for briefly, the Wake County schools really haven't stepped in to be one of those powers. Because just imagine if Richmond stayed east every year,
Right.
not many times a Raleigh school would make a school from up in that area would make it to the state championships.
You're right. Wake Forest High School is probably the only team I can think of in the last 40 years, and they won the state championship 3 years in a row.
Right,
And
exactly.
but that's the only school. I mean, Gardner, I think they won in 1987. They beat Harding. But after that, I mean, I think you have to go back in the early 70s when they won the last state championship. So I think 87 was Gardner, and for about 3 years it was Wake Forest. But after that, I mean, or
Right.
before Gardner, I think you have to go back to the early 70s. So
I know they
it's
won in 70. Um,
was it Broughton that won it back in 70?
yeah. Uh-huh. I
Now
don't know about, yeah, go ahead.
here's a program I want to talk to you about is Maxton. This is a was a powerhouse 1A school. But look at 1972, they lost 10 games and they allowed let's see 331 points that year, and they scored exactly 100. So they were not very competitive at all in 72. And then look at 73. They went from 0-10 to 11
Yeah.
and 1. Robbinsville,
Back to back 11-1 seasons. Yeah.
they went 1974. Robbinsville beat them. So 73, 74 is Robbinsville. An interesting thing about it, Maxton is in Robeson County, and because there's so few schools in the west part of the state, they actually got moved to. They had to play in the western side of the state. So that's the reason why they played Cherokee in the first rounds
Right.
in both
Cherokee and
73 and 74.
Robinson. Yeah. Makes sense.
1975, look at that. They finally beat Robbinsville in the regional.
Yeah. And then they,
But look at these scores. Beat North Duplin in the state championship, 86-8. They played 13 games and they scored 816 points. They averaged 62 points a game, and
that's
they
even by
allowed.
today's standards. Yeah.
That's incredible. They
That's
allowed on
incredible.
average less than 6 points a game. So their average score was 62-6, and that was over 13 games. Just unbelievable. 1976, they lost to Red Springs. Springs was a two-way school. Lost to Robbinsville. Robbinsville, as you well know, there's a powerhouse in
Yeah.
1A.
That's exactly.
77, they lost to Red Springs. They lost to Parkton. Lost in the playoffs against Robbinsville. 78, they had a kind of an off season, went 5-7. 79, they went 9-2. 80, they went 7-5. They kind of waned after about I'm gonna say around 70. After the 77s, they kind of waned off. But from 73 to 77, that was just an incredible program. Sanford County or Sanford Central, that's another school that everybody forgets about. There, of course, they no longer exist because Lee County was consolidated back in
Right.
77. But 76, they went 8-3. 77, they went 9-1, lost one game, lost to Richmond County by a total of 6 points, and they didn't make the playoffs.
That's that era.
1974, they tied Hoggard, and then they made it to the state championship game, lost to Ashbrook 13-12. 73, they won the state championship, beat Greensboro Smith, Ben Smith over and beat them. 14-6, 72. They now Dale. Let me ask you this: what would you actually had to come out with a tie in the state championship game
You mean back then?
back then? How would you
Yeah.
feel? Would you
Well,
feel incomplete, or would you be happy or elated, or
I don't think it was the way to settle a tie. I don't think it was fair. Um, I don't think it was fair uh, method of determining. Of course, that determination helped move Olympic into the state championship. Uh,
that's
they
correct?
tied they tied Garinger, and so no, I I don't like what we have now, placing it on the 10-yard line and playing four downs. But it's certainly better than what they had then of looking at rushing statistics.
Okay, here's another one. 71st and Greensboro Pace 84. I think this is the last time there was a tie in the state championship games of any of the classifications. They tied 14 all. The 71st went 14 and 4. Or excuse me, went 12 1-1. Lost to Terry Sanford in the non-conference. Tied Page for the 112 game. And let me ask you a hypothetical situation. You are the commissioner. No, you're not just the commissioner of the NCHSAA. You're the dictator of the whole association. You get to make your own rules. How would you
Hmm.
do the playoffs? What would
Then,
now? How would you do the playoffs now?
if
If you had
I
to, if you had to do over if there was overtimes in the playoffs, how would you do it?
oh if I could do it any way I wanted to do it,
Any
I'd
way
do
you
it.
want to.
I'd do it more like college, probably.
Start on the
I'd
25
switch.
yard.
I would switch to a college style. Yeah. Um, it's almost tempting to do it like the pros do it, but I would at least go to a college style because I think you got to make it a little, give the defense a little more of an opportunity to hold a team and say force a long field goal, a longer field goal. Let the defense have more opportunity to provide a zero score in overtime. Whereas that's a lot less likely. The only reason it happens in the 10-yard situation is a bad kicker or a bad decision, or a decision by a coach not to kick it but to go for it. But back then, or excuse me, if we were sitting out at 25, that puts a lot more weight on having to have offensive production and defense having an opportunity to win a ball game. I think it's less likely. You can argue that, well, defensive win, if you hold them to 10 yards, but not really, because you can hold them and give up a field goal, and then your team can't kick field goals. And though you held them, say, four downs, or actually maybe lost yardage, and they had to kick a 30-yard field goal to win the ball game. So your defense did what it should have done, but you weren't able to hold them out enough. So,
No, I'm on. This is my idea. This is going to be very highly unpopular with everybody, but this is what would be my favorite thing to do. You're in the playoffs, or even during the regular season, you come out with a tie after regulation. Each team gets the ball on the 50-yard line, and instead of having 11 men on the field, you can only have 8 players on the field.
8-man football.
Have 8 men football in overtime. I wonder how many coaches would change the way they coach during the regulation if they knew how to get 8-man football.
We'll see if I can be less white, like a ghost. 8-man football. That would be.
That would be fun
Well,
to
the only
watch.
reason I don't like that is because you aren't playing 8-man football at any other time
Right.
during the season, so thus you don't have anything schemed either side uh, to play 8-man ball. That's the only reason I wouldn't like that. But
Yeah.
then it does. It's a twist, is
It's
the one way you can look at it.
It'd be a huge twist, and it'd be a lot of fun for the fans to watch. Of course, nobody understands the differences, but the nuances between 8 man, 11 man football, and I don't think I know all of them.
Yeah, but it's so that's the problem is those nuances are not, you just don't scheme for that. So you don't know
Right.
what you don't know what to run. You don't know on both sides. You got ideas of what you going to run. You probably, most teams would probably revert to 7-on-7 style of play. Even though it's, you got 8 men, it would still be, you would probably see teams revert to a 7-on-7. Their offenses that they run on 7-on-7, that's probably what they would run um, if they had to do a series of 8-man football. It'd be interesting.
Right.
That's my negative about it is the lack of preparation by either team, which adds the twist of
Yeah.
and I don't know because I don't know if it really tells us anything. I'd have
And the
a
reason why,
I couldn't do it myself. I couldn't support that.
I understand that. It's just the reason why I just wanted to be a little bit narcissistic towards the coaches, and the reason why coaches would be the one that would really struggle, if, including the three players that couldn't play on the field during that time. So it really wouldn't be.
Yeah, but I think the coaches would struggle
Yeah.
in what to run, what scheme to run, and what plays to operate. They may have practiced some of it, but then again, that's what I say. I think if they were thrown in that situation, they would just revert to their 7-on-7 offenses, and they got an extra man on 7-on-7, so they can potentially run, maybe a little more than they would have in a 7-on-7. Um, some teams do run in 7-on-7s because they're executing what they don't see 7-on-7 as a pass building thing because they're not a passing team. So they'll pass lightly and they'll do a lot of their run plays. So yeah, it would be interesting to see some coaches get thrown into that quandary and see how they reacted. I mean, I can't disagree. That would be highly entertaining to
The,
watch.
the other thing I thought about is like having each team have the ball on the 25-yard line. The first possession, first overtime, both teams can do whatever they want to on offense. The second overtime, you cannot pass on, and then the third overtime, if it's still tied, neither team could run, but they have to do 4 passes on each one of the plays. That would make things interesting.
Kinda.
And the reason why I want to do all that stuff, I don't like having games where there's 5, 6 overtimes. I guess it was 2 years ago, and Kings Mountain and Charlotte Catholic went to 7 overtimes, I believe.
Yeah. Hmm.
That was too much. Those two
So
teams
mixing.
were.
So what I think there maybe is maybe an alternative to that would be every overtime you back it up 10 yards further.
You know
Do it
what? That's a good idea.
first overtime you start from the 10. Second overtime you start from the 20. Although I don't like starting them from the 10, but
I
if
can't
we had
stand
to
that either.
if we had to start from the 10, then the second overtime start from the 20, then the 30, then the 40. I mean, at some point you're going to turn into a field goal kicking game or um you could get outside. The problem is you could get, I guess, with that scenario, is you could get to a point that you're out of range of field goal kickers. Defenses are great. Nobody can move the ball, and the overtimes just start piling up. Um,
Right.
that's the but that would be an interest. That's an interesting thought too. I think there should be some kind of adjustments as they go on in deeper in overtimes. I just don't like that 10-yard start. And I just don't believe that is a true measure of either team's offense or defense.
I agree.
I just hate to see a team play great defense and not have a good field goal kicker on their team. So they play great defense, other team kicks a field goal, and they lose. And they actually play better defense than the team that wins. So
Right.
I know it's a complete team thing and it's both sides, but if your team is really a strong defensive team, uh, I think that starting at the 10 can be a disadvantage for you.
Right.
Let's go to the 25.
There you go.
Let's go to 25 and 35. I almost like the idea of kicking off again, in overtime. Um,
Yes, I think
but
there's something that goes. That, to me, overtimes are a little bit artificial now. I mean, nobody gets the ball starting out on the 10-yard line. I mean, it just
yeah, I
doesn't
think
happen.
that right. I think the goal of it is to shorten the amount of time. Uh, 4 downs, 10-yard line. You hope you get out of there in one overtime or two, versus the further out you move it. Uh, 25 doesn't, I don't think, but if you kicked off, it would. That could really extend the game.
Well, I'm not
Time
against
is-
if on both teams gets them starts the ball on the other team's 40-yard line. Basically, it'd be like the same thing if you kicked off and the ball went out of bounds. Something like that, 35, 40-yard line. I'd be fine with the ball starting that way. Um, but I want to have a little bit more. What's the word for a strategy? I guess than what we offer right now to the game.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't believe there's a lot of, you don't see both of the you don't see the offense and the defense fully get stressed in a 10 yard start. There's less. I think there's the only strategy becomes if you have the ball first and it's fourth down, do you kick a field goal or do you go for the touchdown?
Right.
Because obviously getting the ball second in overtime is a huge advantage for that reason. It's a huge advantage, period, because you got to either score a touchdown or all you have to do is kick a field goal to win. So
Right.
it does change the strategy tremendously of the second playing team in overtime, or it can, we should say. Of course, you can put a lot of pressure on the team if you score first.
Oh yeah.
I know there's arguments either way. I just in the end dump the 10. So yeah, if I was dictator, I'd dump the 10. We'd find something else.
I totally agree with you. Now here's one team for you: Reesville Rams. These another one of these most famous teams that've been highly successful during my lifetime and your lifetime. But back in the '60s, Reesville struggled. They went 3-5-3, 2-8-1. 6-4 was a decent season for them. 7-2-3 and 63, 64, 4-3-2, 65, 5-5, 66, 5-5, 67, 3-7, 68, 4-7. You never think about Reedsville having losing seasons, but they had plenty back in the '60s.
No, you don't, but it's going to come up. Here we go.
And then look at 1969.
Yeah, it comes up and then wham.
They won a state championship. Won through Mount Airy 35-12 in this to win. 70, another state championship. They beat Pisgah 10-7. 71 didn't go. They actually had a losing season that year, went 4-6. But they had a really crappy conference. There was only 5 teams. It's gonna be only 4 teams in their conference. They had Moorhead, they had Andrews, Cummings, and Moorhead now is a two-way school. Andrews is a two-way school, and Cummings is a two-way school, and Reesville is a two-way school. And back then, believe it or not, they all played 4A school. They were all 4A football teams.
Yeah, that's right about the time frame of Ted Brown. Ted
72,
Brown came a couple of years later.
4, 5-1, 73, 5-5, 74, 73. 75, 6-5. I mean, they really struggled. They were not that great back even the 60s and 70s. 76, they went 4-6. 77 went 6-4. 78, 6-4. 79, 5-5. 80, 6-4. 81, 6-4. I mean, look at these teams. I mean, they're decent, but they're not great. I mean, they went 4-82. 83, they went 8-2. They lost Northwest Guilford and lost to Southeast Guilford. 84 went 7-3, didn't make the playoffs. 85 they finally made the playoffs for the first time in how many years was it?
Not a decade,
A decade, 10 years. And
a
we're
little
talking
over
about
a decade.
Reesville. 86 they struggled, went 4-6. 87 went 5 and 88 4-6. 89 they finally made the playoffs, went 7-4. 90 they made the playoffs. I think after 88, I think they made the playoffs every year since from 9 to 3 today. 7-4. 90 they went 9-4. 7-4. 92 9-3. 93 they went 12-1. But you know what? That's the interesting thing about Raceville. A lot of people today they think of Raceville just being a powerhouse in 2A. Back in the day, Raceville had to play 4A football,
Right.
and then they had to play 3A football. That's a lot different. There's a lot of difference between 2A and 3A, and I don't think a lot of people understand that. But a team like Raceville could dominate 2A, and they couldn't do well in 3A. I mean, Southeast Guilford back then was 3A. There was so the Raceville playing 3A ball. Same thing with West Brunswick. They were playing 3A ball back then. Rollsville was 3A. South Brunswick's 3A. 95, they lost to West Brunswick. 96, they lost to Ragsdale back when Ragsdale was 3A. To 97, they were still 3A, went 9-3. 98, look at that. They lose to Tarboro. Both these teams were, I think 97 actually, West Brunswick was 2A, and Raceville was 2A back then. Tarboro, I think that's right. Maybe, yeah, Tarboro was 2A back then. They lost to them 49-18. 99, they lost to, actually 99, they didn't make the playoffs. They lost, that was the last time they didn't make the playoffs, 7-4.
Well, then it becomes hard not to. We're about to come into that era.
2000, beat Tarboro, beat Holmes, lost to Onslow. All three of these teams are state championship quality teams, you know. 2001, 10-2. Then look at 2002. They finally win a state championship game. Went 15-1. 2003, 15-1, won a state championship game. 2004, they lost to the Western Alamance in the regional finals. 2005, they lose to Shelby in the state championship game. 2006, they lose to Cummings in the regional final. 2007, they win a state championship game. 2008, they win a state championship game. 2009, they win a state championship game. What I guess what I'm with Raceville is a lot different than a lot of teams. Like Richmond was dominant for decade after
The
decade after
entire
decade.
time, yeah.
I mean, Raceville was a decent team, but they really didn't become a powerhouse until they got to the 2As. 2010, they lost to Randleman in the first round. 2011 lost to Kinston in the regional final. 2012 11-3. 2013 lose to Shelby regional. 2014 lose to Shelby in the third round. 2015 lose to Lincoln. So a lot different. One last team I want to talk to you about, Dale, if you don't mind, is Shelby High School. I think that's a fun one. Shelby, as you will know of, they were part of the Western North Carolina High School Athletic Association until '76. So things were a little bit different back then. So here's Shelby. 60, they went 7-2-1. 90 in 61, they lose to Hickory 20-0 in the playoffs. 62, they went 8-1-1. Didn't make the playoffs. 63, they went 9-1-2, lost to in the Western North Carolina High School Athletic Association. I think that was the WNCHSAA championship game against Ashboro. Lost to them 9-1, lost to them 21-6. Lost to Ashley 12-9 in the last regular season game. Ashley was that later on. Ashley and Holbrook consolidated to become Ashbrook.
Yep.
65 8-2, didn't make the playoffs. 66 lost to East Rutherford. You know, East Rutherford used to have Shelby's number. Look at that, 65. East Rutherford won 13-7. 66 East Rutherford won 20. 67 East Rutherford won 21-18. And in 68 Shelby dominated. But Dale, what happened to East Rutherford this year in varsity football? Do you know? Do you remember
This year?
this year
Yeah.
for the first time in forever? They did not field a varsity football team.
First time in forever.
I mean, since like probably
Right.
the
Yeah.
inception of the school. So
We're going to see
1969.
more of that, unfortunately.
Oh, we are, especially my area. 69, they played East Rowan for the championship in the Western North Carolina High School Athletic Association. East Rowan 26-21. 1970, they beat the Western Association. 71, they went 6-3-1. 72, they won the Western Association, beat Morrisville 26-21. 73, didn't make the playoffs. 74, they lost to Salisbury. Salisbury has actually finally come back to prominence. They beat them, or Salisbury beat them 14-3. 75, it was a tie for the Western Association between North Davis and Shelby, 21-21. Lexington, they beat Lexington 26-0. So Shelby was a dominant force in the Western Carolina High School Athletic Association. During all those years, I don't think they had a losing season. 11-5 and 67, and that was it. So they finally joined the NCHSAA. Uh, Lost in Newton Conover in the first round. Lost to them 3-0 after going undefeated during the regular season. 78 had a tremendous season. 79 7-3, 80 7-3, 81 7-3. You know, back then you had to win your conference to go to the playoffs. 82
Yeah.
7-3. 83 they went 11-2, went all the way to the third rounds. That would be the regional championship back then. Back then they only had 4 rounds in the playoffs. Lost to South Rowan 21-10. 84 I think they won Division Two back then because they lost to South Point 21-8 during the regular season. So they won the Division Two for the 3As back then. And back then that was 3A. 85 went 10-2 to Kings Mountain 7-0. 86 won the state championship game, beat Havelock 9-6. A lot of people will tell you what a great program Shelby is, and they are. But the Western North Carolina High School Athletic Association was never a state championship. That was the best. Whoever won that association was the best of no more than 43 teams in any given year.
Right.
The NCHSAA, although they were not the only association from like 1929 to 1976, any team was welcome to join the NCHSAA. That made them the state championship association. Shelby was not a member of that until 77, didn't win their first one until 86. And then 87, they liked it so much they won it again. Beat 19-0. 87, they got humbled by Shelby Crest, beat them 27-20, but they won another one, beat Williams 19-0. Yeah, that's right. They won 86 and 87. And 88 lost to Cummings in the state championship game, lost them 41-14. 89, they were still 3A, lost to A.L. Brown in the regional, lost them 21-14. Could you imagine having A.L. Brown and Shelby in the same classification? I mean, they're two very traditional programs, if you ask me.
Right. Especially in that era.
Yeah. And both of them were part of the Western North Carolina High School Athletic Association. 90, I think that might be the last time they had a losing season. They went 4-6. They did not have a losing season in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, but 1990 they did. 91 they went 8-3. 80, 92 they went 8-2. 93 they went to the regional finals, lost to High Point Andrews 41-31. They were still 3A back then. 94 they lost to Pisgah in the playoffs. 95 lost to High Point Central 16-14 in the regional finals. 96 in the second round they lost to Brevard 36-0. And in 97 I believe that's when they went to 2A. And they lost to Clinton. I was actually at that game. I was on the Shelby side. I was with a friend of mine's father-in-law. He was a Mr. Hamrick. I think he was a science teacher over at Shelby. His son-in-law was a good friend of mine, and it was so deafening because these guys were running these damn cowbells. You couldn't hear yourself think. I think both sides were running that. That was when Willie Parker went wild and won that game for Clinton, won it 30-14. I think 98 they won the state championship. They beat Tarboro 34-14. 99 they lost second round to Forest Hills. 2000 9-3. 2001 10-4. Anyway, you'll notice like later on as it goes on, they became a dominant program again.
Yeah.
They won a state championship in 2005. 2006 they won a state championship. 2007 lost to Ray'sville in the regional or in the state championship.
Yeah. In the middle 2000s, they were consistent contenders.
Here's one for you. They actually lost 5 games in the regular season and made it all the way to the regional finals. I mean, when you lose to A.L. Brown and when you lose Ashbrook, both those were 3A schools. Lincolnton was a very good program back then. Freedom was a 3A or 4A school back then. And they lost to Burns. Burns was a hell of a team back then, too.
Ashbrook was a so-so team. But I remember when this happened, I remember their rebound because it was
2013,
not looking good to start that season out at all.
right.
I remember that well.
2013, 14, and 15, they won state championships. I think they lost in 2016, if I remember right. I mean, they've been all over the place. So anyway, so I just wanted to bring that one up too because Shelby has
Yeah,
been consistently strong, and but they've also had a lot of had some luck to it. Also, you can win championships when you're the best of 45 teams, and it's a lot different when you're having to compete against the whole state. And when you're competing from 45 to 90, it's a lot different.
no
And
doubt.
started in '77, they went to the state association, the NCHSAA, and had to play against 90 teams in 3A. But they dominated, and I'll say they dominated both in 3A and 2A. And you don't have many teams will do that.
No, the only teams that I can think that jump around a lot would be Crest has jumped around and 3A, 4A
Yeah.
done well, and um, oh come on, Dale, I had another one in my head here. There's a big difference going from 3A to 2A, though. That's a huge advantage for a team, I think, a program. Because
Oh,
Mooresville was really good as a small, you know, school. Uh, as they moved up and up and up in classification, things started getting tougher and tougher and tougher for them. And I remember there again in the 2000s, people were giving Mooresville grief because they couldn't win. Um, couldn't win like they expected them. The fan base expected them to win, but it's tougher to compete at 4A, especially the teams they had to compete against.
well, you remember Forest Hills, don't you?
Oh
They
yeah,
won a they won a state championship in '84. In '85, I think they moved up to 3A and they almost won a 3A state championship. I mean, just a incredible program.
yeah,
And then heck, I think for like 8 years they didn't even lose a game in conference play as a 3A school.
Yellow Jackets, right?
Yeah, Yellow Jackets. That's back
Yellow
when
Jackets.
Lowry was the head coach.
Yeah,
So some really good programs. So Dell, this Friday, where are you going to go watch a game?
I guess I'm gonna go to Pine Lake. Coach Trotter invited me, and he said they're gonna have barbecue. So
Ooh, what kind of barbecue?
I don't know. I have no idea, but I think that's where I'm gonna go. Really not anything in this area that I'm highly interested in. Olympic and South America are playing. I had that on my schedule at one time, but I don't expect that to be a ball game. And the fact that Trotter's been he was going to join us tonight, but he had an invite from some of his students to attend. I think it was honor society, some kind of banquet or something tonight, and he was asked
Gotcha.
by some students to attend. So um, he'll definitely be with us next week. He had planned all the way up until this morning to be with us tonight. So yeah, I figured I'd go up, and since he invited and he's been willing to give some time to help go over various aspects of offenses, it'll be a good break too, maybe to see some other football. What about
No,
you?
in Mecklenburg, I'm probably going to go to Chapel Hill and Hillside.
Okay.
One thing
Well,
I'm pretty happy about now, they're requiring people to wear masks at
right.
the football games, at least in Orange County and Durham County. Are they requiring anything like that in Mecklenburg County at this point?
No, but I wear my mask. A couple of coaches were telling me Friday night, you don't have to wear your mask. I said, I'm not going to be responsible for putting you guys out of playing in the playoffs. Um, so yeah, I've been wearing my mask on the sidelines, just simply because I don't, I don't want to spread anything. I don't have anything to spread as far as I know, but I'm not going to risk it. I'm not going to be that would really make me feel bad to have a team that's been playing very well and I've gone to the game and then all of a sudden the next week or so they're having to go into quarantine and it's the
Right.
playoffs and now they're out of the playoffs and it contact tracing came back to me as being the person that spread it to them. No, I'm not gonna have anything like that happen because I hate to see anybody uh, lose their season over silliness. So, but no, there are no requirements. No, not by the fans, not by anybody as of last week. In fact, I barely saw. I would say 1% of the people had masks.
Right.
A couple of coaches were wearing masks. There were a couple of cheerleaders that were wearing masks. I can't speak for the fans. From what I saw, I didn't see fans wearing. There probably were some, but not many. So very,
I, I'm
very.
s-
Uh,
I'm seeing less and less people in the stands too as the season goes on.
it's not. I don't know, Jim. There's another variant that's waiting to get its
Yeah.
opportunity. That Lambda variant. It's waiting to get its opportunity to break through. So
You
we
know,
might be
I'm
providing it for that opportunity.
I'm definitely not a guru when it comes to science, and not a guru to high school football, and not a guru to my my profession, which an accountant. Don't ever claim to be a guru for anything like that, but I know a lot of people a little bit confident when it comes to not wearing masks, and I wish people would, really think twice about it because I think there's a lot of arrogance that gets involved in that.
Yeah, and it's the funny thing or the thing I don't understand is that it's not that big a deal wearing a mask.
Yeah.
I'm running around on the sidelines with the mask on. This old fat man. I run it, when something's if I'm down at one end of the field and either the quarter changes or there's been some situation that's caused the ball to change and be at the other end. I move my tail as fast as I can to get down there because I like to be usually I like to be near the ball, not too much behind the ball, uh, and I'm doing it with my mask on. So it's kind of it's arrogance. It's um, I don't know. I think some people are carrying this whole "it's my right" thing a little too far. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you had to wear like seat belts, if all of a sudden we had to wear seat belts, and before '86, I don't think you had to wear seat belts. If that happened today, you'd have people it's like, oh, only 70% of the people that wear seat belts will actually survive a head-on collision. They make all kinds of stuff like that. Any type of reason to, any type of confirmation bias they try to use to substantiate their position. But and
sure.
talk about you moving though, Dale. I think the second time I ever met you, the first time I met you was at Concord Ale Brown. You're on the sideline before I
Uh-huh.
joined you. The second time was 2016, and I was amazed by how fast you were. You're on the sideline, and you kind of remind me of you reminded me of John Belushi when he was on Animal House. You know how
Uh-huh.
like John was like doing this over here, like, and you were really fast. And I like look down there. I mean, you're booking it. I mean, it was
Well,
like I mean, you could feel like you could draft you almost like you're John
oh,
Riggins or
now
something.
I know better than that, but I just want to. I don't like missing plays. I don't like having to look through the team to see a play, so I need to get past the team. Um, I just don't. I don't like missing. It's harder to see what's going on. I do like either it was shooting pictures back then, or now it's just all video, um, and that's hard to do through the team. So yeah, I book, I run. I got to be careful because I just know I'm going to trip or something. Something's going to happen, and I'm going to be running, and something's going to happen. I'm going to fall. I can see that happening. I don't want to. That would be embarrassing. But yeah, it's. I was running last week. I maybe it's not a run. It's a jog. It's a light jog, a fast walk.
No, you were sprinting. You do some sprinting out there. I mean, you got some speed on you. I mean, I'm not
But
gonna say you're fast, but you're quick. Now, you ever been hit by a football player during the game before?
have I been hit? No.
Yeah,
Um, I've
I've never
had
have either.
I've had I have close calls, but I have I think I had when I possessed as youth a good vision of what's coming at you, and maybe it's still with me. So I kind of have a grasp of what the speed is that's coming at me and where they're going to go. Um, I am getting a little slower, so I do have to be a little careful. Uh, do I move quickly enough? I try to stay there as long as I can, but I don't want the kid, really, to be honest, the thought is in my head, I don't want the kid to worry about what happened after he hit me, you know. So I'm not worried so much about me as much as that other part of it. So I usually hang in as long as I can, and then I figure the angle to move left or right, and usually it's always going to be right because I can go right and deeper versus left to me is always going to be somewhat towards the sideline, and I'm trying to
Right.
move away. So certainly I could move away left too, but just yeah. No.
That was about 3 years ago. I was next to this guy at a football game, and he was an older fellow, and he was deaf. And every time he wanted something from me, he always goes, "Hey, boy." And of course, at the time I was probably in my upper 40s. I'm 50 now. And I was listening to him like, "Yeah, what's your name?" And the guy couldn't hear anything. And I told him, he said, "What's your name, Jim?" He's like, "Lim?" No, it's Jim. Lynn, okay. Anyway, he couldn't hear he couldn't hear a dump truck and a nitroglycerin plant. And
Hmm.
there was a play coming up, and he wasn't paying attention. It coming our way, and I got out of the way. I said, "You need to move. You need to move now." He's like, "What? Huh?" And all of a sudden, kabam! And that guy just went down on the. I thought he was dead. It's like I just kind of looked around, and I'm like hope somebody comes. And he gets up, and he was you could tell he was hurting, and he says something kind of ugly to me. He said, "Blank blank, why didn't you tell me that they were coming for me?"
Like I did. You were listening.
I mean,
You know,
he got
I
he got
was
his bell rung.
I was at we were at a scrimmage at Cherryville. I had Jeff with me, and I don't know if you've heard this story, but we're standing there, and they were the play was a buck sweep, and they were going to the left side of the offense, and so usually buck sweeps, and they were running a lot of buck sweeps. So I usually get about 7 yards off the line of scrimmage, because that'll typically direct plays will come right at you, especially buck sweeps. They'll come right at you. Um, so they make for great photos. And Jeff is standing there beside me, and well, this kid is booking, and the kid was big for a uh, that classification. I guess the kid was probably he was a good 180, 180, 185, the running back, and probably right there around 5'9", 5'10", something like that, and pretty good speed. So he was moving. The tackle had just made the block, and he was kind of coming around the tackle to get out, and he was into the second level, and they kind of pushed him more over to us, and I'm like, okay, this kid's coming right at me. I need to move, and so I judged his angle, and I moved, and I heard a boom, and I turned around and looked, and Jeff had been knocked backwards, maybe 5 yards. I mean, that kid nailed Jeff. Jeff was laying there on the ground. And Jeff always has a clipboard. He takes notes. He writes notes a lot, and so he had his clipboard. He had his clipboard there, and he was taking notes. And when I looked at him, he's laying on his back. He had his clipboard on his chest, and the kid was really concerned. He's like, man, did I knock him out or what? And finally, after Jeff's like, okay, somewhat okay. We tell the kid to go on and go, and Jeff gets up, and Jeff says to me, Jeff didn't play football. He said, I guess that's what it feels like to play football. And I told him, I said, no, Jeff. I said, in football, you usually know something's coming at you, so you can prepare a little bit. You can brace yourself. You don't usually get hit without any knowledge that you're going to get hit at full speed. That just doesn't happen. If it does happen, you shouldn't have been on the field. So no, that's not what it's like. But it's a good experience for you. So
He needs to look at the 1982 Stanford Cal game, last game of the season. It was Stanford was up. I think they were up by about 4 points or so. Stanford kicks off the ball, and Cal starts to return the ball, and all of a sudden the Stanford band comes up on the field.
yep,
And unfortunately, this guy was in the end zone, one of the musicians, and the Cal guy just runs right into him
yep.
and just knocks him down. And
Jeff's probably
whoever decided to do that was an idiot. To allow
Jeff's
that
probably
play.
seen that, because that has been shown lots of times. Now I haven't seen it lately, but that was shown a lot. Maybe even during some of the wild world of sports, wouldn't it? Maybe.
Oh, I mean, that was the last game
Yeah.
of John Elway's college career, and because Stanford actually went 5-6 that year, and anyway, stuff like that just it's entertaining for us to see, but it's also it'd be very painful to have a 200-pound player
Yep.
running at full speeds. Yeah, I
Oh,
mean it's like watching NASCAR. If a car's going 190 miles per hour and it's going to a wall and it stops automatically, that's a lot of power, a lot of energy being absorbed right
that's
there.
that's a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I drove when I took Jeff back home. I told him, I said, you need to check yourself, pay attention. You could have cracked ribs. You'll learn a little bit later. You may have bruised ribs, cracked ribs. Because that kid was just he was full speed. We were about 3 yards off the sideline, 3 to 5 yards off the sideline. Probably not 5 yards, probably more like 3 yards off the sideline. So the kid was he was running hard to get every inch that he could get, and he just ran straight into him full speed. And on that daddy, he probably hit him standing up too. I know the kid was not tackled. There were some other guys following him, so there were like two other guys right there on top of it too. I don't think they contacted Jeff. I never asked him. I think it was just the running back that contacted him because the running back went right by me. I could have. I was probably. I'd stepped out of the way, probably 2 yards out of the way, 2-3 yards out of the way. But he went right. I could have reached out and smacked him if I wanted to. Um, Arm tackled him. So yeah, that's not a good. And when we get people that anytime there's young people or any of the photographers that I've brought on that aren't really familiar with that environment, that's the one thing that I always caution them about is you got to be, if you're going to be down here on the sideline, you've got to be cautious of what you're doing, cognizant of what's going on around you, because it's very dangerous.
Oh yeah,
That's very, very dangerous because you take a helmet to the head, which you could, um,
yeah.
and
You can have
yeah, you could
concussion.
have exactly a serious. But it was three. What game was that? It was when South Mecklenburg and Catawba Ridge played, and there was a young guy, uh, photographer. He was high school age. He plopped himself down. If you've ever seen how photographers sit at basketball games on the floor, kind of stick their leg
Oh yeah,
out, and so he's like that on the sidelines, and he is maybe 2 yards off the sideline. And
you're asking for you're just
well,
asking for issues.
I was about ready to say something to the kid. I'm like, you can't get up and get out of the way. The official came over and he was actually in the line. If an official has to run the sideline, especially on a pass play, they may step slightly out of bounds. So they have to have that
That
area
lane,
clear.
yeah.
That's why coaches get flags thrown on them because officials run that area. And so the official looked at him and said, "That ain't going to work." The kid
That's
said,
good.
"I want to get a good shot," and he said, "You're going to have to move." And when after the kid moved, I told him, I said, "Man," I said, "not only you're in his way, but that's very dangerous. You don't understand what's the game, the speed that these kids are coming at you, because you're talking, you know, top level high school football. So you're talking pretty high game speed. There's no way that kid could get up off the ground. And I think it was that week because that kid the following week, I went 2 weeks in a row. He had a cast on. I think he may have had that on a soft cast. He may have had it on that week too. So he was trying to. I think he was trying to both get good shots and get himself comfortable, and not even thinking about where he's at. Um,
Yeah, get hit a couple times. He'll think about it. Um, you remember the 2002 World Series? The San Francisco Giants. They're playing the Los Angeles or the California Angels, basically,
hey,
Anaheim Angels, whatever.
yeah.
And
Hmm.
Dusty Baker's son was like 5 or 6 years old, and he was a bat boy. And the Giants had two guys on base, and their hitter makes an extra base hit. And after the hitter got on did it, his son Baker's son went to get the bats, and one of the Giants player had just crossed the plate and realized there was going to be another play at home plate, and he grabs Baker's son before he got hits. It made the news. And
Hmm.
Dusty Baker says, "Oh gosh, I'm so glad that didn't happen. My wife would never forgive me for this. Blah 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 blah." And it is dangerous. I mean, you're talking about bodies of. I don't care how big you are. If you're 250 pounds or like me, 185 pounds. Uh, if you're standing still, you're not moving, and a force comes at you, it doesn't matter if it's heavier or lighter than you, it will hurt you.
Jim, I tell you, when I in Little League, I was a catcher, and kid hit the ball, and he hit it well, but he didn't hit it out of the park. He hit it um, where it went and rolled to the fence, and I think it was a combination of our outfield maybe was up a little bit more, but the kid was able to attempt a a inside the park, home run. Um, so when I'm getting ready to, they're getting, they're relaying the ball in. So I pulled my mask off so I could see the ball, and the ball one hopped, and I caught the ball, and I turned, and it's the last thing I was covering the plate, right? So I'm over, but basically standing over the plate. The ball bounced, I caught it, and I rotated. And the next thing I remember, um, I was, I don't remember waking up, but they said I was out for about 15, 20 seconds. Um, Still had the ball in my glove though.
Oh wow, look at you.
And so I asked, the first thing I can remember was asking, was he out? And then you look, if you in my Facebook profile pictures, there's a picture of me, and you'll notice I got a black shiner, right? And that kid, so because the kid had a batter's helmet on, he hit me right here, because what my natural instinct as a catcher was I would rotate and bend down, right? So I can cover the plate and maybe touch if the guy's going to slide in. So you kind of crouch over the plate. And I got to the level, and he came in. They told me he did a Pete Rose attempt at the home plate, and that was coming in head first. And but he waited too late to go into his dive. So they said, as he went down, as he lowered, as they think that's what he was doing, um, but he lowered his head, and it hit me right here. So yeah, it. I don't remember. I, I don't. I just remember making that turn, and then the next thing I remember, I'm on my back, kind of waking up, and I don't remember waking up. I just kind of remember people standing over me, and I said, "Well, is he out?" And that's it. So yeah, that was a that's a it knocked me out. And if anybody gets, that's again, go back to my cautioning anybody that decides to take photos, etc., that works with us. Uh, that's the conversation I have with them is you got to be cognizant of what's going on the field, because a photographer will sometimes get wrapped up in their shooting, and they'll have their camera up, and they're just shooting away, and it's not the kid's responsibility to dodge you.
Right.
It's the kid's responsibility to get to where he's going to, and that's his only thing he needs to worry about. So, or should worry about.
Right.
We're not supposed to be in interference. That's the one thing that worried me about. So Jeff had that problem, and so I was a little worried when Allen started going down on the field. But so far, he's told me he's had some close calls, but so far, no,
I go on the field, and I'll tell you what. The first thing I always do, I always make sure I know who's around me. If you get people behind you while you're taking pictures, you're you may not have as good of escape routes, and you always want to make sure you're cognizant who you're around. Also, who's on the field.
yeah,
I've never been hit, and I don't plan to get hit. So
I hope not.
I,
I hope I don't. I don't know
I've
what would
seen
happen
people
if I did.
I've seen people get hit. I've not seen anybody to really get hurt by per se. I did see a referee that got hit one good time. I mean, got his bell rung. He's laying on his back. It was a close play right near the pylon. He's laying on his back and he does this number right here and to score his touchdown, and he was just kind of out of it. So
Yeah, I've
and
seen a few. I've seen a few officials get hit.
but
I have. I haven't seen too many fan or sideline people get hit. Um, maybe a handful at the most is over the years, and nothing real serious except for Jeff. And Jeff turned out not to be serious.
yeah, that's gotta be careful. I mean, the older we get too, our bones are easier to break too. I know my bones are not strong as they were 10 years ago,
Right. No, that's
and
that's what I say. I don't know if I could handle a hit like that, especially the way my back is. Oh man.
might
Uh,
make my back feel better. Who knows? But
well, I don't want to. I'm just not going to put myself into that position. I'm trying my best not to be in that position.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
I step back further now. I'm probably a yard more off the sidelines than I was maybe 5, 6 years ago.
Right.
Um, I have moved back just a little bit more just because of that. Because one of the things that's happening is the game is faster. Okay, the game's getting faster because those kids are just across the board. They're getting faster.
Well, the kids are bigger too than they were when I was in school because most programs have weightlifting now, and I don't know if that was necessarily the case back in the 80s. I believe
It wasn't.
weightlifting was we saw was you
No,
didn't see people doing as repetitive as you do now.
no, I
But
can promise you it wasn't. The first program to really we had a universal weight machine. Um, few schools had, and then some schools had some dead weights. But only the first program that actually took it seriously was Kannapolis. They built that weight room in 77, 76, 77. They built a college. They built a college equivalent weight room. Uh,
wow,
but most, we talked about this last week. I don't think most programs really took lifting seriously. I mean, like it is now, um, until Knott started thumping people on the head. Now, Kannapolis did, um, but I can't speak to how serious they took it. They definitely built a nice weight room. There's a big article. The reason I knew about it was there was a big article write up about it in that summer in the summer of '77, and my best friend and I went to Elon College for football camp. And so on our way up, we um, we tried to go by Kannapolis because I read about it, and it's like, Greg, why we're going up 85? Let's go over to Kannapolis, the high school, and see that weight room that they've got. We couldn't. We weren't able to see anything, but that's the only reason I know that they had it then. That was Boswell, right?
yeah, Boswell.
That was He was the coach, I think, then.
Yeah, that
Um,
sounds right.
So no, in the '80s, not everybody was taking weightlifting seriously. Now, you know, it's an everyday, year round. Many teams lift on game days. Uh, it's a huge it's a big difference. And I don't think that really started coming into play until the 2000s. Some places may have, I can't speak to, like Richmond may have been doing it more. Who knows? But
Right.
yeah, now the kids do it all the time, and they got all kind of special speed training, and so they're fast, they're strong, they're bigger, much bigger. When I was in high school, people didn't break 200 pounds. Like we had one person, maybe two, on our team that was over 200 pounds. Most big was 180. That was a big player on our. I'd go back and look at the roster and see, but I'm thinking like 180 was the big. Linemen were about 180. Um, Now that's that's rare to see a lineman under 200 pounds.
Back in 1969, Bo Schembechler, his very first year as the head football coach at Michigan, and one of his offensive linemen was Dan Deerdorf.
Yep.
And Dan was a very easy-go-lucky guy, and but Bo wanted him to be lighter, and I think Dan weighed something like 257 pounds or something like that, and Bo wanted him to be at 245, and he pushed him and pushed him and pushed him, and finally got him on the weight on the scale, and Deerdorf was pretty much just dehydrated by then, and he weighed all of 243. And Schembechler looks at him and says, Dan, I'd really like to be able to tell everybody that I don't have a football player that's over the weight, over 240 pounds. And he said Dan just kind of looked at him, ready to pass out, and he said he knew that Deerdorf probably had about 4 or 5 cheeseburgers in his mouth within 3 hours after practice. Just he always liked Deerdorf. Said a lot of these offensive linemen, they're always worried about their weight, so they put these electrical tape under the scales. Back in the '60s, as you know, there was magnetic abilities with the tape. You could put a certain amount of tape and be lighter. He said that some of his offensive linemen made the mistake of doing that, and they came out with like weighing 197 pounds. He
Oh.
says, "Let's look at the back of that scale because something's not right." So,
All right.
all right, Dale, do you have anything else for this evening?
No, I don't think if there was anything. I don't think so. We got what 3 weeks left in the season, in the regular season.
That's right. We're on week 9.
Um,
It's really this season's just flown by. So
we got. I think it's going to be interesting to see how the final 3 weeks go. I'm
but
interested in seeing what's going to happen with several of the games, but and I'm talking about the big 4A here in
oh yeah.
Charlotte. But
But the big thing is we have 3 more weeks of regular season, and then you have 6 weeks of playoffs instead of 5 weeks.
yeah,
6 weeks. I mean, the whole month of November and the first 2 weeks in December. Nothing but high
um,
school football playoffs.
yeah, I would love to see. I would have loved to have seen the whole season just trimmed, not. That's too. I mean, that's a half a year of football.
Yeah, I agree.
50% of our football is now going to be obviously. If you look at the entire season, it's what's that makes it about geez, so 6, 11, almost
Love
50% of the season being
this is
50%
ridiculous.
of the season being playoffs.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. So
It's too
yeah, it's
much. Too
it's
much.
it's, it's going to be interesting to see how everybody does with not having the subdividing. I think we should have had subdividing. I think that was a mistake. But
See, I've been a proponent for a long time of subdivide and then I have a have another game where the subdivides play each other.
yeah, that'd
Um,
work.
that that would they could have done that with this format this year, but
Yeah,
drop the season to 10 games. So no more than 10 games. That's it, and regular season and subdivide so that you can get there definitely are differences in uh, size of school that it does matter.
right,
But I guess the counter to that is some of the biggest schools don't do well, and they should, which is kind
right,
of odd. But so maybe that it's just a general statistics that you have more to choose from. You're gonna end up you have more potential of having um, the potential of having more key players, important or talented players. Probably what changes some of that today is the statistic is true, but we have so much movement in players. You know, people deciding to not attend one of these lesser schools who have not been doing well, who might be a big population, but let's go over to Myers Park or Chambers and play. Um, and that kind of skews those statistics. But it does matter in a number of other areas too of depth,
right,
etc. So I don't know. I'm in a ways I'm a fan. I shouldn't say a fan. I have no problem with subdividing. I have more of a problem with split conferences than I do subdividing. Um, so yeah, West Charlotte's three. There's two 3A schools in that conference: West Charlotte and West Mecklenburg.
right,
Um, West Charlotte will have potentially a winning season, but they're gonna be the number one 3A team out of that conference.
right,
I'm not a fan of that. I have more of a problem with that than subdividing, I guess.
right.
So are we going to
Gotcha.
regret? Yeah, were you saying you think we regret it? I think we should have subdivided. Yeah.
Yeah, I like to see more state championship games. I also think I don't know how they're going to do it this year about the state championship location. If it's all going to be at Chapel Hill or it's going to be split between Chapel Hill and Raleigh or wherever. I don't know how that's going to go.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't. That's something I haven't looked to see if they've even discussed it. I don't like having all the championship games up in the triangle or up in the up in the triangle. Um,
And that doesn't bother me.
I know it doesn't, but I would like to see the games spread out more. I'd like to see some games here in Charlotte.
Oh, I think they should have one in Fayetteville. I think they should have one in Greensboro, one in Charlotte. So, I think that'd be a good thing to do.
Yeah, there's other. I'd like to see the games spread to other venues. I get the giving the kids an opportunity to play on the field. The biggest colleges at least once in their life. I get that part of it, but UNCC's got a great stadium here in Charlotte that would be ideal in size for a state championship game. Memorial Stadium here in Charlotte now. They've rebuilt it, redone it. Some of the smaller universities. What is it? Even up in your area, North Carolina
Elon,
A&T or Elon.
probably Bowman Gray one time, or it wasn't up Simeon over at High Point or wherever it was.
Right. I mean, there's
That'd
other
be
locations that would make great venues. I think
yeah. So I
there's been
wouldn't
the
be against
argument.
I
I'm
wouldn't be
sorry. Go
against
ahead.
having I wouldn't be against having all the regional championship games being in places like over at uh, over at East Burke High School. They have one of the best stadiums around.
Right.
Um, that'd be great. I mean, to me, it'd just be a good idea, a good ability just to get a lot of these new good stadiums some exposure. But
So go back
yeah,
to school hosting state
yeah,
championships. That's a
I think they stopped that in '84, if I remember correctly.
that's I don't know. There's advantages, or there's some. I think there's some cool things about that, especially now that a lot of the high schools have stadiums capable of supporting the crowds, and I just think a stadium that's full and tightly packed is more energetic than having them spread out at Keenan or Carter Finley. They're 5,000 people scattered, in a 65,000 seat stadium. That's
It's awful. And when you have 800 people coming from Murphy, North Carolina, to play Plymouth, that might have 700 people
yeah.
come in on another side, and you have 1,500 people in a 50,000 capacity stadium. It's awful. It just and you can't hear anything. The fans were just basically a non-factor.
That's why the
So,
games at Wake Forest, I think, were probably that's a smaller stadium.
oh, it is because the fans were on top of you too. At what?
Yeah, so it's a little bit better venue, I think, for the state championships in that regard.
Yeah,
Um,
it's more centralized in the
Nothing.
state too.
It is. I mean, nothing beats from a media perspective of being at Carter Finley, but from a, I think from a fan player, perspective, Wake Forest is a much better venue. That's why I think like UNCC would be a great location because that's an even smaller venue. Because even Wake Forest, you never came close to maximizing or halfway, filling that stadium.
Right.
That's a
If I had to,
sad, yeah.
if I had to rate the four stadiums when it comes to hosting the championship games, Wake Forest number one, without a doubt. Number two is almost a tie between Duke and Carter Finley. Duke has improved quite a bit.
So
They're a very
I haven't been to Duke since they had 2006, was it 5 or 6? When they were horrible hosts at that because Duke used to be bad about basketball first, so if there was they'd schedule a Duke game, on
yeah, it's
championship
awful.
day, and they really gave it no proper consideration. So I haven't been there since they got it back. I haven't been to Duke
Right.
state championship game at Duke. I've just gone to Keenan and Carter Finley, and
The press boxes at Duke are quite better than Carter Finley. I think Carter Finley has maybe a little bit better uh, atmosphere um, than Duke does. Parking's a lot easier at Carter Finley than it is at Duke.
Right.
Duke's parking is not that great. And then the last one is my alma mater, Keenan Stadium at Chapel Hill. The press boxes are mediocre at best. The atmosphere is not that good, and parking is easy. Parking at Chapel Hill on game day is the easiest one of them all.
It's
Of
not
course,
bad. Right.
it's not bad at all. The problem with that though is Chapel Hill Keenan Stadium is non-existent when it comes to atmosphere for high school football. It's just not there.
Right.
It is just
Yeah.
awful.
I got to say, I've not, from that viewpoint, Keenan has not been a great, I'd say a great experience. It's not as energetic, but the most energetic I think is Wake Forest.
Wake Forest without a doubt, and
Yeah.
they also have the best fields in December. That turf that they use at Wake Forest is just incredible. Uh, I remember going to Keenan Stadium several times where they've actually pulled off the grass. Of course, now they don't have to worry about it because they're on field turf, but they take out the grass and they actually played on sod between the 25-yard lines, and that was awful. And you asked about like what happened. They're like, well, they were planning to play it the year or the week beforehand, but the season got pushed back, and there was a miscommunication. I mean, to me, it would not have hurt to keep the field turf on there for an extra week, but they didn't.
Right.
And anyway, just that was awful. And some places on Keenan Stadium, when it is cold and there's not much grass and it's frozen, it is like concrete. And those kids were getting bruised up like crazy. And the good thing uh, with BB&T Field at Wake Forest, if you land on that turf, there's a certain level of cushion that you just don't get at Carter Finley or Keenan Stadium.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Wake Forest
So,
having the games there. I really am. That's
well, I'll tell you what, Dale. Next week, maybe we can talk a little bit about the Western North Carolina High School Athletic Association a little bit more in detail, because there's a lot of things that people do not know about that association, and also how it kind of whimpered to a death.
right. I'll take tonight's. Um, I won't do it tonight, but I'll take the stuff tonight, and um, it's more dissectable than last week's was.
Right,
Uh, so I did cut out a couple of things from last week, but the history part was not. I didn't know where to begin and end.
right.
This tonight I do, so I can kind of separate it and put it into smaller packages in case people want to, go back and listen to it.
Gotcha.
All right.
All right, I'm losing my voice, so I
Yep.
better call it evening.
We got one. We got one person that stuck with us a long time. I don't know who. I never saw a comment get posted, but
That's cool.
somebody is. I don't. Can you see the number of people online?
I see exactly like you do. See one now.
Okay. Yeah. So we had as many as three. Not a lot, but I don't know where they're from. If they're from Facebook or YouTube or Twitch or Twitter, or where they're where they come in from. I can know that afterwards after I go back and look. We did have a number. I said number. There were some YouTube. There's been some YouTube viewers. I'm surprised at that, but we've had some YouTube viewers.
That's cool.
All right. Well, I'll let you get, and thanks whoever that person is.
All right, guy. Dale, it's good talking to you, man.
All right. See ya.
See you, brother. Bye.